Hello, welcome back to lesson 3.5, solving quadratic equations. So again, this is realistically, take a look at what we're doing here, finding the x-intercepts of each of the following. So here's where we learn how to solve for the roots, or get from here to kind of like your roots. So basically you're trying to get the factored form. So let's take a look at 1a. So the easiest way to get the factored form is to obviously factor it. So we've practiced factoring before. We're going to need to find two numbers that multiply to -3, add to -2. Those happen to be -3 and +1. So this is what my first one is actually looking like. And x equals 3 and x equals -1 will be my x-intercepts. But as we say, life isn't fun when things are this easy. So we want to make things a little bit more complicated. And this is not just for fun, because, for example, if you take b, you cannot actually find two numbers that multiply to -30 and add to -7. And whichever way you try and do that, with either like our any of the methods we use for factoring will not give you, because the answers aren't like nice perfect numbers. They're complicated fractions. Well, they're fractions, and in some cases the answers are even radicals. So not something that you can guess and check kind of deal. So we're going to learn a different way to do it. We have learned a way in grade 10 which involves completing the square, not completing the square, which involves quadratic formula. So we can say, for example, in this case, a equals 1, b equals -2, c equals -3. If we put in the formula -b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a, and we say -2 plus or minus square root of -2 squared minus 4 times 1 times 3, -3 divided by 2. We get 2 plus or minus square root of 4 plus 12 divided by 2, which is 2 plus or minus square root of 16 divided by 2, which is actually 2 plus or minus 4 divided by 2, which is just 2 plus 4 divided by 2, or 2 minus 4 divided by 2, which is 6 over 2, or -2 over 2, which is 3 or -1. If voila, we get the same answer. And we can do this method actually for both of B and C, but we're still not going to do that either, because we're in grade 11. We're grown adults, and we're going to do a different way, which involves completing the square. So let's see how we're doing that. If you have not understood completing the square, or you're confused about the steps, please go back and check lesson 3.2 and 3.3, I think, is where I talk about completing the square. So go back, check those lessons, become familiar with it, because we're going to follow essentially most of the same steps with slight differences to our method. So here, first step we're going to do is group these two terms and factor out any coefficient in front of the x squared term. There's no coefficient here, so I'm just going to squared minus 2x like so. The difference is I'm going to actually move this 3 to the other side and keep it there, because that's where I want it to be in this case when I'm solving for x. So my second step is kind of done to the side. I take this -2 term, I divide by 2 to get -1. I take the square of that, and I get +1. And that magic number is what I am going to add and subtract inside the bracket, we'll remember. So +1, whoops, don't close the bracket just yet. +1 minus 1 equals to 3. Again, don't forget that this second step is really just like a separate thing. It doesn't really follow. That's just finding the magic number. So that's separate. And now here, our fourth step is to take the subtraction outside the bracket. So I'm left with x squared minus 2x plus 1 minus 1 equals 3. Step number 5 is write this as a completed square. our perfect square. And I'm going to move this 1 to the other side to give me a 4. And now I'm going to take the square root of both sides, which leaves me with an x minus 1 equals to 2. But whenever I take the square root, I have to add a plus or minus. So here I have my two answers. I get x minus 1 equals 2, or x minus 1 equals negative 2, and x equals 3, x equals negative 1. And I see here that all three methods gave me the same answer. We're going to learn how to do it the completing square method, because that is the grade 11 method, the new method that we learned. Obviously, things aren't going to stay that nice and cozy. We're going to learn some things which can only really be done using the completing the square or quadratic formula. So there was no easy way out. There's no easy way out of this one. And this one is quite the complicated guy. So pay attention. But I say it's complicated just because the arithmetic involved is not as easy as before, but it's just following the same steps, really. Factor out a 2 here. And remember, when we have to factor out of this term as well, so divide both terms by 2 is what realistically we're doing, minus 7 over 2x. And then again, I'm going to move the 15 over to this side before I start working. Here is where I differ from my completing the square a little bit. What I'm actually going to do is we're going to say, just to not confuse our steps, so like 1.5 step, or the 1.5 step, is we're actually going to divide both sides by 2 to get rid of this 2 in front here. That kind of makes my life a bit easier, because I don't have to worry about anything coming outside of a bracket at any point in time. So I'm going to divide the 2. This is an extra step, but it makes life easier. We can't actually do this when we're finding the vertex form, but when we're solving for our x, we can actually add this 1.5 step into our thing here. And now again, the second step is, again, take this negative 7 over 2, divide it by 2, which is 7 over 2 times 1 over 2, which is negative 7 over 4. Take the square of that, I get 49 over 16. And this is what I'm going to add and subtract from this side. Plus 49 over 16 minus 49 over 16. These three terms are going to complete the square for me. X minus 7 over 4 squared. And I'm going to move this 49 over 16 to the other side. 15 over 2 plus 49 over 16. And now, again, step 5, as we saw here, was taking the square root. Before I do that, I'm going to simplify this a little bit. Times 8 times 8. 120 plus 49 is 169 over 16. Now I'm going to take the square root. X minus 7 over 4 equals 13 over 4 is the square root. Again, square root of 169 over 16 is square root of 169 divided by square root of 16, which is 13, and this is 4. Don't forget the plus or minus, very important. And now I can split this into 2, which is x minus 7 over 4 equals plus 13 over 4, and x minus 7 over 4 equals minus 13 over 4. And now I just bring the 7 over 4 to this side. So realistically, x equals 13 over 4 plus 7 over 4, which is 20 over 4, which is 5. Or x equals negative 13 over 4 plus 7 over 4, which is negative 6 over 4, which is negative 3 over 2. So these are my roots. X equals 5 or x equals negative 3 over 2 are my x-intercepts. 5, 0, negative 3, 2, 3 over 2, 0 are my roots or symmetrical points or whatever you need to do with that. That's how we do this question. This is how we're going to proceed, and we are also going to do that for part C. So let's do this one more time. Again, very same ideas. Factor out a 3 from the first two terms. That's our first step. This negative 7 is already on this side, so I can leave it there. My step 1.5 is to divide both sides here by 3 so that I get just a nice bracket here without any complications. My second step is to find the magic number. Take this, whatever this term is, divide it by 2, which is actually the same as multiplying it by half, which is negative 11 over 6, and take the square root of that, which is 121 over 36. Add and subtract that term to my original equation, step number 3, plus 121 over 36, minus 121 over 36 equals negative 7 over 3. I'm going to group these three terms, complete the square, x minus 11 over 6 squared, move this to the other side, equals negative 7 over 3 plus 121 over 36 multiplied by 12, multiplied by 12. 7 times 12 is 40, 84. 84 plus 121 over 36 that's 6 to 90, 16 to 100, 36 to 120, 37. So that should be it. Negative 37 over 36. I think. That looks right? Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Take the square root of both sides. Oh, positive 37. That makes more sense. Whoops. Okay, now x minus 11 over 6 equals square root of 37 over 6, plus or minus. I can't do anything about that square root of 37, unfortunately. It's going to have to stay there. And now again, once I have that final plus or minus step, I'm just going to split it into 2 and write positive 37 over 6, root 37, and x minus 11 over 6 equals negative root 37 over 6. Which again, I'm going to move this, x equals root 37 plus 11 over 6, or x equals 11 minus root 37 over 6. And these are my two x values, or x-intercepts, and that's how I find them. So you'll see here that, again, very similar process if we know completing the square, just to be careful with fractions. Technical difficulties again. But again, hopefully we'll see here that these are correct answers. And again, yeah, I forget to remember what I was saying. Again, if we know the method and the rules that we're doing, if we just follow the steps, just be careful with the fractions and the arithmetic, shouldn't be that hard. Now we get to the harder questions. Let's look at this one. This one looks quite interesting. I don't even know what to make of that. 4n squared plus 12n plus 10n plus 24. It's an interesting question. So let's take a look. The problem here is there is a 2n term on this side, and I don't like a 2n term on that side because my n, I shouldn't have any n terms apart from inside the square. Like I should have n minus something or n plus something squared, and that's the only n I should have. So the fact that I have a 2n here is really troublesome. So I'm going to get rid of that, and the only way I can do that is combine it with this n. So I'm going to expand this out first to get 4n squared plus 12n. I'm going to bring the 2n over to make it minus 2n. I am going to leave the 24 there because I want it there anyways. We'll see here that I'm going to combine this plus 10n. Now this looks very much like some things that we've done before. So now we actually get to start our first step, is group the n out of there. The 4 out of there, I should say. Our 1.5 step was divide both sides by 4 so that I can get rid of that 4 outside the bracket. And I'm just left with, I'm going to simplify the fraction here with this. And now I can continue as normal. My second step here is to do 5 over 2 divided by 2, which is 5 over 2 times a half, which is 5 over 4. Squared gives me 25 over 16. Okay. And now I can add and subtract that number from both sides. Plus 25 over 16 minus 25 over 16 equals 6. Group the first three terms, complete the square here, n plus 5 over 4 squared plus 25 over 16. Now it looks like I have to do the unfortunate work of finding a common denominator. 6 times 16 is 96. It's 121, I believe. N plus 5 over 4 squared is equal to 121 over 16 if you add these two fractions. And again, that was technically my fourth step. My fifth step is taking the square root of both sides, which I will proceed to do. And square root of 121 over 16 is square root of 121 divided by square root of 16, which is 11 over 4 plus or minus. So we can split this into 2, and plus 5 over 4 equals 11 over 4, positive, and then plus 5 over 4 equals negative 11 over 4. So again, just rearrange. So minus 5 over 4, minus 5 over 4. And this gives me 6 over 4, which is 3 over 2, or this gives me negative 16 over 4, which is actually equal to negative 4. So those are my two different n values. And that's how you do this question. Again, not that hard once we figured out from this step. This is again going to look very similar. Factor out a negative first. I don't want a negative one, I want a positive one. So I am going to factor out the negative to give me x squared minus 6x. And I'm going to move the 9 to this side to give me a negative 9. And then I'm actually going to divide by negative 1, divide by negative 1, so that I get x squared minus 6x equals positive 9. And hopefully we'll see here that now I can kind of do the same thing I've done before. This is I've done my step 1. And now my step 2 would be take this number, negative 6, divide by 2, take the squared, number is 9, x squared minus 6x plus 9 minus 9 equals 9. Group these three to give me x minus 3 squared. Move this over here to give me 9 plus 9 is 18. I skipped writing this step, so this is step 3, this is step 4. Step 5 would be taking the square root of both sides. So I'm left with, I'm going to continue over here, x minus 3 equals root 18. Before I continue, I am going to convert it into a mixed root, because I know this is root 9 times root 2, which is actually 3 root 2, don't forget the plus or minus that goes there. So now here I can split this into 2, and realistically when you can't simplify this answer, you're going to get x equals 3 plus 3 root 2, or x equals 3 minus 3 root 2, and you can just combine that into 1 again and write x equals 3 plus or minus 3 root 2. This is a completely acceptable final answer. You don't have to split it into 2. But yeah, this is how we solve quadratic equations using completing the square. I'm going to check out the homework for a couple of seconds. 177. So let's go to page number 177. Let's see. Again, this is by factoring, quadratic formula. We've done all that before. I've shown you examples of how to do both those questions. Okay. Again, just finding the x-intercepts. I think we were to do questions 7 and 8. So again, this question is asking how long will it take for the ball to hit the ground. So what it's asking for is, so the ball is initially hit from a tee that's 0.6 meters tall. and it goes all the way over here. So what it's asking you is find the zero. So like find this time right here. So, okay, let's do this question. The context is kind of important here, so I'll do question number 7. I'll try question number 8. So 7 here states that h of t equals negative 4.9 t squared plus 6t plus 0.6. So let's solve this using our completing the square method. You can do it any method you like. I'm just going to do completing the square because that's the new way we learned in grade 11, so we're going to practice that as much as possible. We're going to factor out this negative 4.9 weirdness from here, and we have to sub in that h of t equals 0 because we want that the time ideally when the height is 0, when it hits the ground, right? So we are going to put this in. So we're going to first say that negative 4.9 t squared plus, what is 6 divided by 4.9? I need a calculator. Calculator. 6 divided by 4.9. Oh, that's absolutely disgusting. Okay, so first this becomes a minus. We're going to leave that as a fraction because, because of that. It's weird. And I'm going to say equals to 0, but I'm going to move the 0.6 to the other side like we did before. So it's going to be negative 0.6. Divide both sides by negative 4.9. So we are going to get t squared minus 60 over 49t equals, again here, 6 over 49. I've just got rid of the decimal from the denominator by multiplying both of them by 10. Hopefully we're okay with that. But this is not by any means, by any way, shape, or form going to look pretty. I'd even advise not completing the square, probably. Just scrap this and just use quadratic formula here. Because I am not looking forward to completing the square in the slightest. But we shall persevere. I would recommend doing quadratic formula and checking my answer. I'm already in way too deep for me to back out now. So step 2 is do 60 over 49 divided by 2, which is 60 over 49 times 1 over 2, which is actually 30 over 49. I am going to have to square that, unfortunately, which gives me 900 divided by 49 squared, which is 2,401. So, t squared minus 60 over 49t plus 900 over 2401 minus 900 over 2401 equals 6 over 49. So I am going to complete the square here. T minus 30 over 49 squared equals 6 over 49 plus 900 over 2401. I moved this subtraction to the other side. Now I have to times this both by 49 times 49. 6 times 49 is 294. 294 plus 900 is 1194 divided by 2401. This equals t minus 30 over 49 squared. And if 1194 is not a perfect square, I am going to cry. It is not a perfect square. I am officially crying. Take the square root of both sides. T minus 30 over 49 equals square root of 1194 divided by 49, plus or minus. So now t equals plus 30 plus or minus square root of 1149 divided by 49. Now, let's say I'm calculating this to 2 decimal places. I am going to calculate that. Square root of 1149 is roughly 34.55. So I get 30 plus or minus 34.55 divided by 49. So again, this splits into two here. I have 30 minus 34.55 divided by 49. But keep in mind what you're finding. You're finding time, and I'm going to get a negative answer here, so I can just ignore this because time cannot be negative. The other option is 30 plus 34, which is actually 64.5543. This answer divided by 49, which actually gives me approximately 1.31 seconds. So this is how long it takes for the ball to fall to the floor. So that is the answer to that question. I'm already getting a migraine doing that, so I'm not going to do question number 8. I'm going to leave that in your capable hands. And I see it's not that difficult to do. You can try that on your own. And here, this is, I mean, okay, maybe I'll just give you a hint. So what was the population in 1995? Again, t is the time in years since 1995. So in 1995, t was just 0. So if you put in p of 0, you're going to get 50. So 50,000 was the population. In 2010, t equals 15. So you just have to find p of 15. This is just substituting numbers in equations. So hopefully this is not that complicated and not that confusing so far. We can just do that very easily. And this is the question we're going to watch out for. What year will the population be at least 450k? Because I'm going to scratch this off and put k so that I can sub in just 450, because this equation is in thousands of people. So I'm going to say 450 equals 0.4t squared plus 10t plus 50. And if those of you who have been following all the videos hopefully see that this is very similar to one of the other questions that we got stuck on. I got stuck on and we skipped before. So you can go back and try that one, because here now I know how to solve this. I'm going to move 450 to the other side. Is this 50? Yeah, plus 50. So if I subtract actually, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to move 50 to that side, subtract 50 from both sides, and I get equals to 400, and then continue with your completing the squared. Factor out a 0.4 plus 10 divided by 0.4 is 25. T equals 400. Divide both sides by 0.4. T squared plus 25t, I believe, equals 1,000. And then you can complete the squared here. You should get something like divide by 2, square that. 625 over 4 minus 625 over 4 equals 1,000. Move this subtraction to the other side of this equal to sign. Group these three terms, you'll get t plus 25 over 2 squared. And again, hopefully those of you who are completing the square and have kept up and following all the videos are noticing that the thing that I use after I complete the square, this 25 over 2, is my, in the second step when I actually do 25 divided by 2 and get 25 over 2, and before I square that, this number here is what I'm going to put inside the square. Again, hopefully we're seeing that. If you go back to the theory on completing the square on 3.3, we'll understand how I do that. And then again, this is just, you can continue this at your leisure. 4,625 divided by 4, take the square root, find your two answers, etc., etc. And maybe you'll get 1t is negative. Again, you can basically ignore that t and just focus on the t that's positive, and then add that to 1995 to get your year in which the population will be at least that value. Again, I would recommend trying all these questions. They're maybe not part of the homework, but again, as I mentioned on the day before we left, this is realistically where we're picking up all the assignment and hard test questions from. So try those. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me that question in the comment section below this video, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. So hopefully, again, this has helped. We will continue posting videos as the lessons are updated. So until then, stay safe. It doesn't really look like we're going back to school anytime soon, at least until September. So the next time I maybe see you, you'll all be in grade 12. Or yeah, so that's exciting. Last year's school, etc., etc. So yeah, have fun. Enjoy the quarantine period, I guess, while it lasts, and I will talk to you soon.